As promised, this is part 2 of the big Marty Smith interview, the last one he did before he died in April 2020. And heads up, there is actually a part 3, which is already available on the We Went Fast podcast channel. So look for that when you're done with this one. The other voice you hear is David Dewhurst's. He interviewed Marty for research on his book, Motocross, The Golden Era, which is available at shop.wewentfast.com. It makes one hell of a gift, and it's worth every penny of the $150. And it ships for free if you order at shop.wewentfast.com. Enjoy part 2 of the Marty Smith interview.
In episode 2 of the Marty Smith interview, Marty talks about the golden years at Honda. The championships, the bikes, the people he rode with, the people he steered clear of, and the people he always wanted to beat.
The factory bike was, we were having some mechanical problems with it, and I DNF'd a few races in Europe in the GPs and still finished third overall, but it just wasn't a good year because the bike was so far behind.
When you say behind, what in pack horsepower, suspensions?
Not so much the horsepower, the power band. The power band wasn't as good, the suspension was not near as good, and it was still air-cooled. And, the bike considerably dropped horsepower after 15 minutes into a 45-minute moto. And, when the Yamaha water-cooled bikes, those things are staying strong for 45 minutes. And as I said, it made me push harder on the bike. We had a lot of problems with that bike. We had a lot of problems because I overrode that bike, trying to get as much out of it as I can, trying to get more out of it than the bike was willing to produce. And that put pressure on the bike, it put pressure on me, it put pressure on the mechanics, it put pressure on Honda of Japan trying to make this 2-year-old bike competitive, and it just didn't work. So 76 couldn't get over quick enough for me and my mechanics.
Yeah. So when back in those days, you say, two questions. Why do you think Honda kind of backed off, kind of rolled off the throttle with the development? What was the reason for that?
Well, David, as I said, I dominated in 74 and 75. And this 125 class, this motocross deal was relatively new to Honda. And I think that they just thought they got this whiz kid that's just dominated in his first 2 years, and let's send him to Europe and let's just win the GPs and the nationals. And I really don't know what they put their R&D into in 76 or at the end of 75, if they put it into more in their 250 in their open class, because they did just come out with an open class in those years. And I think that maybe they put predominantly most of their time into the bigger bikes and not the 125 class because it was such a new class, and I did dominate in the first 2 years of it, and they thought, well, we don't need to put so much time in it, let's do a little more development on that big bike.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's it, but I'm guessing that was probably had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. So what kind of things were you telling those guys back in Japan? It's like we got to get more horsepower, we got to get better suspension, or was that something you and John R. or whoever were doing here on your own anyway?
Well, we were, that's when Dave Arnold came into the picture. Dave was doing my national bike in 76, and John R. moved around to a different position, but primarily the mechanics, they were talking with Honda of Japan, and they were relaying all the information that we thought that we needed to do. They were taking care of all the dialogue. It wasn't me calling up Japan and say, hey, Mr. Sashiro Honda, we need this, we need that. It wasn't like that. The mechanics took care of all that stuff. So yeah, Honda was Dave and John R. and the team manager Dennis Blanton. These guys were doing all the dialogue with the factory, telling us, relaying all the information that we thought we would need, and hopefully Honda could make take that.
Now we're getting into the claiming rule era and that whole mess of people up in money to take away these trick factory bikes, which altered the way things went for you, or well, everybody, but you in particularly. At some point, Honda, you had the Type 1 and the Type 2 bikes, and at some point they were going backwards, trying to use the old bike so that people weren't claiming the new bike.
Well, in '76, about halfway through the national season, we'd been riding that Type 1 bike. We'd been riding the FMF production bike. And it wasn't any big secret. The whole world knew that Honda was struggling with our 125 campaign. And factory came out with a Type 2. Type 2 was incredible. Lots more suspension, a whole bigger frame. The Type 1, it was like I was riding like a mini bike almost. We grew. That was a big difference in how I grew from 74 to 76. I got a lot bigger. This Type 2 was amazing. Had a great power band, very rideable, lots more horsepower. The suspension was amazing, and so Honda sends this bike over, and immediately I got back on to winning. We could compete with the Yamaha and the Suzuki and the Kawasaki, and I thought we even had a better bike, even though it was water cooled. It was amazing, and this claiming rule that AMA had was probably one of the stupidest things that anybody could ever imagine. Why they would have that? They think it's going to level out the playing field. Well, it didn't. It hurt. It hurt the progress of all the factories, because they were afraid that somebody they could put all this time and effort and money into a bitchin' bike, and then you're going to get some rich guy in Podunk, Iowa, that's going to buy that bike, and then all your information and your time is going to be gone, and it's going to be out into the free world. Well, Honda especially was very, very, very protective, very protective. So they sent this Type 2 over. I rode it a few events. I won all the events on that bike, and all of a sudden Honda said, "Hey, we're going to repo that bike." They tell American Honda, "We're repoing that bike. We're going to put Marty back on the Type 1 or the production bike, whatever." And that sucked, because that Type 2 was so good. And they basically just threw away the 125 class for 76 after that. We had no chance. No chance.
Yeah, so that obviously was in the middle of all those battles with Hannah back in the day. Was kind of going off this theme a little bit, but who was of all the people you rode against, who was the toughest guy you ever rode against? Was it Bart?
Well, I'd absolutely have to say it was Hannah, because Hannah was probably driven to beat me more than anybody else was. His Yamaha signed Bob Hannah to beat Marty Smith, and it was great. It pushed me harder. It made me better. People used to say, "Do you like Bob Hannah? Does he like you?" And off the track we got along fine. We were very cordial. I didn't send him Christmas cards. He didn't send me Christmas cards. No box of chocolates, none of that. But we were cordial. "Hey, what's up?" Give a high five here and there. But on the racetrack, neither one of us liked each other, and it was pretty evident. We'd bounce off each other, and yeah, it was a somewhat of a friendly rivalry on the track. But no, I did not like him on the track, and he did not like me. You can't like your competitor. Anybody that's giving you grief on the track, if you like him, something's wrong with you. I surely didn't like anybody that was giving me good battles. No, I didn't like it. "Oh, that was cool. We had a good battle." I don't dig that. Somebody gives me a battle, I got to work harder next week and try to beat him and roost him. I didn't like my competitors.
Was there anybody else that came close to Bob in that?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of good guys. My own teammate, Tommy Croft, Marty Tripes, Gary Semix was good, Jim Pomeroy. All these guys were my teammates, and Danny Laporte. These guys were they were all my competitors, and it was different back then too, because now I got to get into during the week I would see some of these guys that were local guys, Tripes and Brock. We would practice together during the weeks. Ricky Johnson back in the day, he was a little bit after me, but we'd get to the races and Barnett, for example, Howerton, we'd end up playing these stupid little video games at the hotels we'd get to, Space Invaders and Pac-Man and stuff. And we all rode for different teams, but we would all go get Baskin Robbins and we play these video games. Daryl Schultz, he was another crazy guy that we'd hang out with, and it was different. We had really good camaraderie, and we rode for all different teams, and it was different than it is nowadays. It was really different. It was fun, and we all got along really good, even though we rode for different companies. It's just different.
They're very, very, very different. And we always get into the whole thing of Fox vans and super big trailers these days, and the whole difference. So the Fox van thing, everybody says, yeah, that was a better day. It was better for everybody. Maybe not the most. It didn't look as cool for everybody necessarily as the big transporters, but everybody seemed like it. Was that the same? And you kind of be separated from everybody else a little bit. Was that an advantage?
Well, it was definitely an advantage. I mean, we had the box fans, and for Honda anyway. I can only speak for Honda. We had 2 riders per box van, and we had six, sometimes 8 riders. So Honda would pull in on Saturday to the racetrack and have four huge box fans, and that was the shit, man. People would see Honda pull in, and these kids that lived in these small towns, they would just watch. They would be in awe. And the big Honda factory box fans pulling in. And now you see a box fan, it's nothing. Shoot, my gardener that lives down the street has a box fan. It's nothing nowadays, but it said Team Honda on it with a motorcycle right there. And it's like, it was pretty intimidating for these kids.
So when you were 2 guys to a box fan, so you were all on the same team, but were you kind of separated a little bit because you're in different box fans? I mean, did Tommy Croft know what you were running as far as jetting and suspension?
Yeah, absolutely. We all knew. Back in, I think it was 77, we had Pomeroy, we had Lackey, me, Tommy, and Tripes, and we all had the box fans parked side by side, but there was one major tent right out behind them all, and all our bikes and mechanics were underneath that tent, so we all knew what we were running. There may have been a few things that my settings differed from Tommy's settings, and different from his settings, differed from Jimmy's and Brad's, but pretty much we all ran the same stuff back in the day. That's when Bob Fox was taking care of us on our Fox shocks, and we all had pretty much the same stuff. We really did.
So all your cylinders and everything were pretty much the same, or was that an individual, mechanics job?
A little bit of both, David. A little bit of both. They had a few different cylinders they would send over, and back in '77 was a good year for me, and Honda would send some things over to Dave Arnold, my mechanic, that some of the other mechanics didn't get because I was their number 1 rider, and we're going to give this to Marty Smith. And so they'd send something over, and then I'd try it for a little while, and a couple weeks later they'd send a couple more over, and then the other guys would start using them. They were really good to me. Honda was really good to me.
Yeah. So going back to the kind of the competitive thing and the Honda thing, who was Bob obviously was your kind of your biggest competitor in a way. Who was the most intimidating rider? Who was the guy you go, ooh, I don't want to, I'm going to give him a couple more inches in the corner. Who was that kind of guy?
That would be Rex Staten, and pretty much everybody would agree with me on that one. Rex was the type of guy that, if Rex was in front of you, and I was coming up to him, and if I'm going to pass Rex, I'm going to pass him where I can pass him and get away real quick. Once I passed him, I didn't want to leave any room between me and him in a turn, because if Rex had 1 inch, Rex would come in and he didn't give a rat's ass who you were. He'll come in and take your front wheel out. So when I would pass Rex, I would try to put as much distance as I could between the two of us as quickly as I could.
Was so back then, was it, you think it was kind of more aggressive, more fun in the rubbing than it was, there is right now?
No, that's all the same. That's something that's evolved, where I'd say it's no different now or no different then. If you had to rub a little bit, just like they say, rubbing's racing, we would rub. We would come in and we would bump and grind. It's no different. It's just the same.
Yeah. And some guys say, yeah, today they're all, so it's like, they touch somebody's complaining.
Well, just when Osborne passed Savachi in that last turn for the 250 championship, I don't think that was a pussy move. I give him all kinds of credit for making that move, and that's what we do back in the day. Same.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of difference between then and now? I mean, does it look different? Yeah, obviously the bike's different, but as a general sport, do you think it's changed a lot since you were riding?
Absolutely. It's a business. These guys take it really serious. They have trainers that back in the day we didn't have trainers. Everything that I learned on my own. And it's a big business now. These kids are making over $1 million and then making another $1 million in their product contracts and their gear contracts and tires, and it's amazing what the money these kids are making. So yeah, it's a lot more serious, and the good guys are taking it really serious. And some of the guys that are finishing outside the top 10 here's what I understand: the guys that finish between 10th and 20th place are it seems content with that. Now, if I finished outside the top 5, I was pissed off. I'd worked so hard during the next couple weeks trying to figure out why I finished outside the top 5. And now these guys are just happy to be in the main event and finish 16th, 18th, 10th, whatever. And I don't get that.
Yeah, it's funny. That's been a common theme too, as being over everybody I've interviewed. Is like Brock in particular, but it's like when I went to the start line, I knew I was going to win that race. I mean, there was nobody's going to start with a winning race. You see, a lot of guys these days, it just seems like, say, as long as I get into the main, I'm happy. But all the guys that were really good, there was a level of confidence that was different to everybody else. They were convincing.
And I know what that's like. When I practiced during the week, I rode so hard and I trained so hard during the week. I knew there was absolutely no way anybody worked harder that week than I did. So when I would show up to wherever it was that I was going racing that weekend, for whoever it was at Honda or Suzuki, I knew that when I got on the start line, nobody did any more than me, and I could just see myself going into that first turn in first place. And you got to visualize that. You got to know that you're better than everybody.
One of the things David Bailey said when we talked to him was that because he was out in Paxton, Virginia, kind of away from everybody else, he didn't know what the hell anybody else was doing as far as training, bike, running, bicycling. He didn't know. So it helped him because he'd finish riding and go, yeah, maybe those guys rode another 20 minutes. So he just went back out there and rode another 20 minutes just in case. Was that kind of how you trained too? Or did you know what everybody else was doing?
I didn't know what everybody else was doing. I just knew the guys that I was close with. I knew what they weren't doing. And I just felt that if I go out and do a little bit more, just a little bit more than what I normally do, that's going to put me to another level, which is what it's going to take to win another number 1 plate. I just felt I had to do more than everybody else because I knew there was guys that were going to be coming up shooting for me, trying to take my job away from me and trying to win the races on the weekend. And I felt I have to do more to beat these guys.
What was that more? Was that more riding, more bicycling? More
everything. I did more weightlifting, more racquetball, more water skiing. I rode more during the week. My motos were longer. I'd come in from a moto in the middle of summer out in these tracks, and I'd drop my bike down in the dirt, and I'd whip off 25 fingertip push-ups. And I felt like, and I had my gear on, still had my helmet on. And I had to do this every day that I rode. And I was on my bike every day. I didn't let a day go by that I wasn't on my bike. If I didn't feel like doing hard motos, I'd take off on my bike and I'd go trail riding. I was just on my bike every day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know, all the guys that we've talked to so far have been the same way. It's, you know, it was, I had to do that extra minute, that extra 10 minutes, whatever it was always the same way. So you didn't have a trainer, it was just you training you, basically.
It was me training me learning, me teaching myself. It was me. It was a one man show.
Did, during all these years you were riding, what do you think you learned, especially preparing for race, the training and whatever else? What did you learn through that period that you really didn't know when you started out? What's the balance here?
Well, I learned that it was physical conditioning was going to make the difference of me getting first or not. Physical conditioning was everything because our bikes weren't as good as they are now. We only had half the suspension then that we do now. We had 40 minutes plus 2 laps was sometimes a little over 45 minutes, 2 of them. And I knew that in the heat, in the humidity, if I'm not the fastest guy, but I can outlast these guys, I can win a number 1 plate. And so it compelled me to work so hard during the week. I did exercises in sauna rooms, knowing that on the weekend I'm going to be back in the East Coast, somewhere down south, and it's going to be so hot and humid, 100 degrees with 100% humidity. I spent a lot of time every day during the week in a sauna doing exercises, push-ups, sit-ups, standing up against the wall. And this is after I got doing my 2 motos.
Would you guess that today's riders are any fitter or any different over the way you were back?
There's a couple of guys out there that I believe worked every bit as hard as I did, if not harder. Guys like Carmichael and Ryan Dungey and some of these guys like that. I mean, these guys were machines. They were absolute machines. And Villapoto's another one. They worked really hard. And, you know, you can see the guys that work really hard, those are the guys that finished 6, 8, 10, 12 seconds in front of everybody. There's a reason why they're up there so far in front of everybody. Not because they did the same as everybody during the week, it's because they did more than everybody during the week.
Yeah. What games started winning? I mean, I've heard why-not stories about, you know, coming up on the start line and looking down at other guys' tires and going.
I hope you're right, and I hope you get to interview Jimmy, because Jimmy would be great. If he hasn't lost all his memory by now, he'd be a perfect guy to interview, because he was one of those guys. Here's a perfect example. We were at, I believe it was Lake Whitney, Texas, and I came up behind Jimmy. And passed him in practice, and felt really good. I mean, I was on my game. I was riding obviously a Type 2, it was probably the 450, or it could have been the 480, and I was on my game. And I came in after practice, and I gave Dave Arnold my bike, and I'm sitting there in my chair. Here comes Weinert strolling over, no shirt on, with his hat backwards like this, all sideways, you know, just acting all funny and shit. And walks over and sits down. And he goes, "You all right, Smitty?" I go, "Yeah, man, I feel good today." He goes, "Wow." He goes, when you passed me, he goes, "Your bike's all over the place. Is your suspension okay?" He goes, "I've never seen one bounce around that bad." And he looks over to Dave. He goes, "Dave, is that bike okay?" He goes, "When Smitty passed me," he goes, "he was all over the place. Bike's hopping here, front end's washing out. Are you sure it's good?" And I go, "Well, yeah, it felt really good." And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not really feeling so good. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You better check that back end was hopping all over the place." So I'd start thinking, I start getting in my own head, and man, and he goes, all right, well, have a good day. And he'd take off, and Dave would come over. He goes, I thought you felt good, Smitty. I go, well, I thought I did. That was a typical whiner. That was typical whiner, getting in your head.
Did other guys do that, or was he just...
Nah, that was Jimmy. That was Jimmy.
Did you ever do that? I mean, were you in...
No, I never did that. I wasn't smart enough to do that.
So, what did that affect you? I mean, did you really start questioning the bike and you?
Absolutely, and luckily Dave picked up on it, and Dave said, "Nah, you looked really good. Your lap times are good, Smitty. Let's just leave things where they're at." And luckily Dave was the voice of authority, and I listened to him, and we left the bike the way it was, and I'd go out and stomp Jimmy's ass in both those motos. So.
Let's just, what was the single best bike you ever rode?
Hands down was that Type 2 Honda.
In 76?
That 76 125 that came over for a little bit, that was the best bike at that time that I had come across. And then in 77, when I competed in the 250 and the 500, I rode a Type 2 bike. Absolutely the best bike I ever rode to this day.
If you could have one bike on the wall in the house above the fireplace.
Type 2 Honda. And it would probably be, I'd be happy if I had the 125, the 250, or the open bike. They're all amazing bikes. Absolutely amazing bikes. Hands down.
Yeah. Because then, so after Honda, you rode Suzuki, right?
80 and 81.
80 and 81. Did any of those bikes really compare? I mean, was it...
You know what? The 80 and 81 Suzukis were really good bikes. They were a full floater, and it was at a time of my career and my life that I was pretty much over racing, and I didn't really adapt to the Suzuki very quick. I rode it well, and I finished well, but not well for what I was used to finishing. I just think my heart wasn't in it, and that combined with not feeling comfortable with the motorcycle, not settling in with it right away, just wasn't as competitive as I was in my early days on the Honda and when I quit riding Honda.
Was it, I mean, just night and day different to what you'd been riding at Honda? I mean, just no real comparison?
You know what? It was a completely different motorcycle, but a lot of it was probably in my head. I hate to say it. I didn't have an 80 and 81. I didn't have the desire. I didn't have the drive that I did when I was riding for factory Honda. As I said, I had pretty much quit after 79, and then Suzuki had contacted me and said, hey, I know you got some left in the tank. Are you interested in riding? So I did. They gave me a decent contract. And Suzuki was a great company, don't get me wrong. They were great, and I'm very, very grateful for what they did. But it wasn't in the cards for me anymore. That's all.
Barnett did pretty well on those bikes back in the same.
Yeah, he did pretty well.
He was kind of crushing it.
He was killing it. He was killing it. But he was a Suzuki guy anyway from the early ranks. I went from I was a Honda boy, and put me on a Suzuki. I mean, it just, not only did it not look right, but it didn't feel right.
Yeah. And it's a mental game too. I mean, if it's not up here,
it is.
Because talking to Bailey, Bailey just overthinks everything, and he's just like, everything's in his head. But there is kind of a common theme that everybody's got it in the head that I am the fastest, I am going to win. So you have to have that kind of mentality. You're just never going to do it.
That's right.
What was your favorite racetrack?
I liked a lot of racetracks. I'm not really sure I had a favorite racetrack. I mean, I love Daytona. Even though I never won a Daytona, I think I got a couple of seconds there. Damn it. I liked Mount Morris. I liked Southwick. And those are all different terrain tracks, I loved Carlsbad. I loved Saddleback.
Which do you think you rode best on? I mean, what sort of surface did you enjoy?
Well, I'd have to say it was all the dry blue groove stuff, the hard pack stuff out here on the West Coast, because that's what I grew up riding. And I felt really the most comfortable on a hard pack track.
Which track did you go to and go, oh crap, here we go, this is going to be the weekend again, here we go?
Well, I never really showed up and did that. I can say I never did. I don't have a track that I would go to and say I don't like this terrain, or I don't like this track. There was never a track like that for me. I psyched myself out, pre-race all week long. I knew where I was going to go race, and if it was a track that maybe wasn't my favorite, I would talk myself into making it my favorite. So when I showed up on the weekend, I felt good mentally, because it's a mental game.
Actually, this is one of those weird questions. If you could change the world and come back as somebody else, is there some guy that you always wished you could have been or emulated? Is there another racer or person that you go, God, you're so cool, I wish?
There's nobody I'd want to come back as. I'm very satisfied with how my life has turned out. I'm super satisfied how my career turned out. If there's one thing I wish I had, I really wish I could have had that 250 championship in '77. A broken transmission kept me from winning that one. I would have won that along with the 500 in '77, and I think about that. But to dwell on that and to have it as a hang up, I would have to say shame on me for doing that, because I got 3 national championships, and not a lot of guys can say that. And would I have liked to have that other championship in '77, that 250? Hell yeah, I would. Would I have liked to win a Daytona Supercross? Hell yeah, I would. There's a few things that I could say, hell yeah, I wish I had, but to wish on it and dwell on it, no way. Hell no. I'm super happy with how my career turned out. I'm super happy where I'm at in my life with my wife and my kids and my grandkids and my dogs and being retired. And yeah, I couldn't be in a better place at this time.
So what was, that being the case and everything's cool, what was the single best moment in your career?
In my racing career?
Well, in any of it.
In my life or in my career?
Well, we'll do both. Well, in your racing career.
Well, I would have to say the most gratifying thing was beating Bob in '77, because he kicked my ass in '76 for whatever reason. I don't want to say a bike. I don't want to say this or that. Bob kicked my ass in '76, and I wanted sweet revenge in '77, and we battled all the way through. And I had mechanicals. He had mechanicals. I ended up coming out on top in the end, and I love it. And I would have to say that was probably one of the sweetest, if not the most sweetest thing in my whole career. There was a few races that I had won that I'm super happy about, but it had to probably be that '77 championship. And I would have to say, in my life, in my personal life, gosh, David, there's so many things that have been outstanding in my personal life that I don't know if there's any one thing that I could say tops anything. I mean, my marriage to my wife Nancy has been amazing. We've been together for 44 years. The birth of my 3 kids, that was a highlight, as it should be in anybody's life. Now I have grandkids, and seeing each one of those kids being born and then grow up a little bit. I mean, and now Nancy and I are what I consider in our golden years, and we're starting to do a little traveling and doing more things, just the two of us. And we're still into sand buggies, and we go camping out to the dunes. We still do that in the wintertime when the weather's cooled down, and we love that. We have a blast in that buggy, and we love going to the river, camping in the motorhome, and yeah, our life is all about enjoying life right now.
Do you still ride motorcycles?
Not so much anymore. I feel like I feel like I don't want to take a chance on getting hurt and throwing my golden years away and ruining it for my wife. We still want to get up and go to the beach and walk in the sand in the morning, and wake up in the desert in our motorhome and go take a walk through the dunes and walk down to our little swimming area. And if I get hurt on my motorcycle and I can't do that, I'm going to be pissed off. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take that away from my wife.
Thanks for listening to the Marty Smith interview conducted for the book Motocross, The Golden Era. If you want to see images of the book and get a peek at its contents, go to shop.wewentfast.com. Part 3 of the Marty Smith interview is already available on the We Went Fast podcast channel.